The fourth meaning expressed by conjuncts is apposition. Apposition is a relationship which includes two types of relationships. The first one is explanation, and the second one is exemplification. They are different from each other. Explanation is when sentence 2 explains sentence 1, and exemplification, it is also called illustration, is when sentence 2 is an example of sentence 1. Here are the conjuncts which express apposition. In the first list, we have those which show explanation. We have namely, between brackets, viz. We can use the word viz. It means namely. We have also the conjunct that is. The abbreviation of that is IE. It is preferable to use that is in a formal writing. That is to say. And finally, in other words. The second group contains two conjuncts which show exemplification. They show an example or an illustration. Here we have two conjuncts. They are transitional expressions. For example and for instance. We take the examples now. The first two are examples of explanation, and the second pair are an example of exemplification. Well, we take them one by one. It's erroneous. In other words, it contains mistakes. So the writer says it's erroneous, then he explains the first statement. He explains further by saying, in other words, it contains mistakes. Another example, he's the Prime Minister. We use this type of conjuncts when there is some ambiguity and we want to clarify in the second sentence. So he's the Prime Minister, that is, he is the head of the government. Or he is the Prime Minister, namely, he is the head of the government. Now we take the second pair where we have an example. There are lots of pleasant places to go. This is a statement, and the second statement is an example of it. The peer is one, for example. Notice that I have used the transitional expression, the conjunct, for example, at the end. We can place it at the beginning. Say, for example, the peer is one, full stop. Finally, he is often a bit rude. Note how we show an example of his behavior. For instance, he just demanded his coffee this morning. This is an illustration. Now in this slide we have the fifth relationship, which is result. Sentence 2 is the result of the previous sentence. So result shows the effect or consequence of what was said before. We have a set of conjuncts: accordingly, consequently, hence, so, therefore, thus, as a consequence, in consequence, as a result. Always remember that you should not change these phrases, they are fixed. You are not allowed to change the preposition or an article in them. Notice that the word so is a conjunct. When it is used as a conjunct, it behaves like a conjunct. It begins a sentence, and because it is short, we can drop the comma that comes after it. So we have sentence, full stop, so, sentence without any comma in between. Some examples here. Her train broke down, consequently she was late. Or her train broke down, accordingly she was late. Hence she was late. Thus she was late. As a consequence, she was late. In consequence, she was late. As a result, she was late. Next, he lost his wallet at the station. Therefore, I had to go and help him out. Right. The next relationship is called inference, from the verb to infer. Inference, from the verb to infer. To infer means to draw a conclusion based on logical reasoning. So this has to do with logical thinking. Inference indicates an opinion or a conclusion reached by reference to what was said before, by following logic. We have a few conjuncts here, in other words, in that case, and than. Notice that in other words can be used with explanation, and it can be used also with inference. Here it is the context which determines its meaning. Here are some examples. The first example: an accident happened in front of the post office this morning at 8. You were there at that time. Then you saw the accident. So from the facts that you give before, you reach a logical conclusion that you saw the accident. This is logic. You were the only person who spent the night in this room. The money was stolen from there the same night. Now logically, in other words, you took the money. Here, in other words, is not used for explanation, but to draw a conclusion. Right? We have another example. You don't want any chocolate. Well, in that case, I can have it. And finally, you were in the party last week. Logically, then you saw my mom. The next relationship is reformulation, from the verb to reformulate. To say something and then you reformulate it. You say it differently. You decide to say it differently. So reformulation involves changes in formulating an idea. You say something, then you feel that you have not said the right thing, you change it. We have two conjuncts which express reformulation. We have rather, it can be said also, or rather, and we have in other words. Now you notice that in other words is used with a third meaning. This is a reformulation. Here are some examples. This has gone horribly wrong. Or in other words, it's a disaster. Here the writer means, or it's better to say, it's a disaster. Or using other words, it's a disaster, but the expressions that I have used are not conjuncts. The known conjuncts are the ones which are listed here. They are unable to do anything, or rather, they do not want to do anything. So at first, the writer said that they are unable to do anything, and then after thinking for a while, he thought that this is not really the right idea that he should say. Then he changes how to, he has expressed it differently. He uses here or rather, and we can drop or and start directly with rather. This is the meaning of reformulation. We come to the exercise now. Write passages, your own passages, in which you illustrate the uses of the conjuncts which express apposition, result, inference, and reformulation. Write as much as you can.